Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm reviewing a book from Oxford University Press, and it's an important book. It's called Identifying the Enemy, with a subtitle, Civilian Participation in Armed Conflict, and it's been written by Emily Crawford. It's this book here, which we'll look at in a moment. OUP have come up with a good book here, we think, very, very pertinent at this particular time. I'm recording this towards the end of the year in 2015. My wife Elizabeth and I talked about the book, and we've given it, for our review, the following title: A Different Kind of Warfare, The Legal Realities. And that's the title, hopefully, that will be in the journals and on the web. Now let's look at the book first of all. It's a paperback. There it is. Front, spine, nothing on the back. Inside the dust cover, there's just a little bit of information about the book there and the author, and then these are other titles in the series. There is at the back, it runs to just over 250 pages. There's a short index at the back, and at the front you have the front page there. There's a very nice dedication, which I will just refer to there, which you can see. And then you've got a preface, which is well worth reading. It gives you an up-to-date position on where we are at the moment. You can see even with the preface that there are plenty of footnotes. And the preface is dated January 2015, Sydney, Australia. And after that you've got the contents section. You can see the number of chapters. They're not very many. Each one has a conclusion at the end. There are 8 chapters in total. Then you've got at the back a bibliography. You've got table of cases, then some international treaties, acts of parliament, so forth, legislation. Lots of abbreviations, very important. Again, far more abbreviations than one would think, and it's quite useful to have that to explain certain things which may not necessarily seem to be quite clear initially. Then there's an introduction. Then, as you can see, there are subheads and lots of footnotes. You can see, just going into it, the Hague regulations going back a few years and so on. Then we go to the back of the book, and you can see the bibliography is extremely detailed. There is, as I say, a lot of footnoting throughout the book. It's a very interesting book, and it's very relevant at the moment with Europe and the coalition forces at the beginning of a major conflagration with the forces of Daesh, ISIS, whatever you want to call them, people who committed serious international atrocities. So this is an important book at this particular time. This is what we say about it anyway. The book is not only timely, it's anticipatory. The world in general, and the West in particular, are now at war with the forces of militant extremism, which I've just highlighted. We are, in other words, in a different kind of war. Now, the book, as I've indicated, was published earlier this year in 2015 by OUP, and when the title was launched, just much before mentioning war on terror as such as a term, had become precisely that. We've now become much more used to that phrase. It's escalated now into what can possibly be considered to amounting as a global conflict, and that's really where we're going at the moment at the end of 2015. The author of this work is Emily Crawford, and she deals with the major concerns and challenges of modern warfare, which is very different from what I experienced when I served in the army, and very different from the last major conflicts we've had. The term then civilians, mentioned in the subtitle, refers to those caught in arenas of conflict who are not direct participants. And there are a lot of them, as we have seen with the migration problems within Europe, certainly in the year 2015 and before. But what, asks Crawford, is direct participation in hostilities in war zones where there is little or no distinction between civilians and military participants? And what about private security personnel? And what about cyber attacks? Clearly, the law of armed conflict, which largely pivots around the traditional distinction between civilian and military, needs to be thoroughly re-examined, which is what Miss Crawford set out to do in this book, particularly in the first chapter. And as I say, there's a lot of footnoting, but do just read the body copy of the text and you'll get the flavour much better, and the conclusions, of course, are extremely useful at the back. Reference is made, of course, to the Geneva Convention. There are numerous references, for example, to such theorists as Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued that the other side has the right to kill its, the hostile state's, defenders whilst they're bearing arms, but as soon as they lay them down and surrender, they cease to be enemies or instruments of the enemy and become once more merely men whose life no one has any right to take. Well, that doesn't, of course, take account of what Hitler did and what Stalin and Mao did, so you see how things have changed. It is interesting here that the relevant protocol of the Geneva Convention states in effect that if there is any doubt as to the status of a person, the parties to the conflict are obliged to designate such a person as a civilian. But even with all this in mind, it is unarguable rather, that, as the author states, the process of correctly and lawfully identifying the enemy and observing these principles has become remarkably difficult. That, of course, is the basis of where we are at the moment with this, what is actually a serious predicament. The issues tackled, particularly in the second part of the book, have become all too urgent of late and are therefore terrifyingly relevant. In other words, targeted killing, there's a definition of it in the abbreviations, which you'll be interested about, remote warfare, drones, cyber warfare, private security contractors, and the especially difficult problem of organised criminal activities, indistinguishable from armed conflict in scope and intensity. Think about the mafia, the fascists and World War II, for instance. So you can see the difficulties when you are dealing with criminal activity, because frankly the Nazi regime was a criminal activities regime, stealing property and killing people. So you can see the basis of it. Let me conclude by saying that we think the book is a thoughtful, penetrating, rationally argued and carefully researched examination of the largely intractable problems pertaining to the legalities of modern warfare. Anyone, though, therefore, professionally involved in these and related matters, be they in the law, the military, or in government, we think will find this book singularly enlightening and useful. So thank you very much to Emily Crawford. The research in the book is current as at January 2015 with her introduction, her preface at the beginning. It's an excellent book. Let me just show it again very quickly. As I said, not a paperback, it's a hardback. There's the front, spine and the back. And just opening it in the middle, you can see a structure. This is about targeted killing, and that's exactly what we're actually entering into at the moment in Syria and Iraq. You've got a lot of, as I say, you have a very large number of footnotes, and then there's the very substantial bibliography at the back. It's a very, very detailed scholastic work, and I think it's a very, very important book at this particular juncture. So thank you very much to Emily and to OUP for, I think, a great contribution to one of the big problems we're going to be looking at in 2016 and onwards. Thank you. Bye-bye.